Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Today we're going to be looking at one of the more popular unique items in Diablo 1. It is a mace with 1 to 8 damage, durability 32, and a required strength of 16, and it was known as the Dreamflange. Now, the Dreamflange was actually an interesting item that had quite a storied history. The Dreamflange was, believe it or not, relatively unknown as a mace. It was actually very commonly hacked, and it was hacked in such a way where it was usually changed into various other items like helmets and rings and, amulets and all sorts of various things. Mainly because people would much rather be using, like, a King's Swords of Haste, for instance, in their main hand. And having a Dreamflange as your weapon was a big downside when you could potentially be using a much higher damage weapon. This is the original Dreamflange mace, however, the one that most people might have never even seen. Now, the Dreamflange has some pretty decent stats on it, and it seems to be geared specifically toward a caster. It has a really nice bonus of magic of 30, which is insane. So you end up with, as a little low-level warrior with only 10 magic, you end up with 40 magic, which is insane. And on top of that, it also has plus 50 to mana, which means that you go from a meager plus 10 mana to a massive 90 mana between the 50 mana that it gives you and also the 30 magic. The 30 magic obviously coming in handy for obviously reading spell books. Even if you weren't going to use this as your main hand weapon, you could definitely keep a Dreamflange on hand just simply to read those books. It also gives you 50% magic resistance, which is pretty insane because that's only 25% from capped out, and it gives you 20% light radius. And if all that wasn't enough, it also gives you +1 to all of your spell levels, which means that your spells cost less mana and they do a little bit more damage. Now, character level seems to have more of an effect on spell damage than your spell levels, but spell level is definitely part of the equation, which allows you to dish out more damage, so it's definitely useful to have the spell bonuses. Now, a lot of people would actually hack this and turn this into rings, and you can imagine why this would make a really good ring, because it would give you like +1 skills, right? So +1 spells. So if you had 2 rings on, that's +2. If you had an amulet, that's +3. If you had a helmet, that's +4, and so forth and so on. And you had basically like +4 to all spell levels with like massive amounts of magic and massive amounts of mana. Would make it really easy for you to read your books, really easy for you to cast insane number of spells. And if you use Mana Shield, would give you a relatively large hit point pool since you're getting 30 magic and 50 mana, which, as you saw earlier, can give me, what is that, 80 mana on a warrior? Pretty sure it goes even higher on a sorcerer. So if you had literally hacked yourself, 1, 2, 3, like 4 Dreamflange items and then combine them all together, you could definitely have some absolutely crazy mana pool. And then once you have that crazy mana pool, well, you turn that Mana Shield on, and all that mana turns into HP, and then you don't really have to worry about much of anything, do you? Keep a couple mana potions on hand to heal up if you need to, but just, in general, kind of just a ridiculously OP item. How much does it sell for, I wonder? 6,612, so not very much. Overall, the Dreamflange was good for pretty much everybody. Even if you were a warrior, even if you were a rogue, you would probably keep a Dreamflange on hand because that 30 to magic made it much easier to read all the books that you needed. It was actually pretty common to have like a book reading set, which was basically just a bunch of items that had bonuses to magic so that you could read the books, and 30 to magic is definitely an insane one. And if you happen to have like the hacked ring versions or the amulets, like you could easily carry around, what is that, 30, 60, 90... 30, 60, 90, 120, and then the helmet would be, 150. So you could easily have 150 to mana if you had, like, multiple Dreamflanges, items, like, sitting around, which is kind of crazy. It is a quality level 26 item, so it's probably something you're not going to find until the end of normal or the beginning of nightmare difficulty, and just a really good item all around. It was good enough that people would hack the ever-loving crap out of it because, well, just turning it into a different item was amazing. And it's funny that most people didn't even know that it was actually a mace. Like, people would have the rings, they would have the amulets, they would have the helmets, but they wouldn't have the mace because nobody really wanted to use the mace because there were better items that they could put in those specific slots. It's no different than in Diablo 2. Remember, they used to have like Aki rings and like wizard spike gloves and things like that. And it was just like, then you had your cake and you could eat it too. You had your wizard spike on with your massive resistances and your faster cast, but then you got to use something else in your main hand. So you could get both essentially, which is pretty much what they were doing with Dreamflange. I think they're pretty much everything for this particular maze. Definitely a very powerful one. Something that if you find, you're definitely going to hold on to no matter what, even if it's just for reading books. And as always, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And keep in mind, this is my full-time job, so anything that you can do helps out. And as always, keep watching.